Sonny Gray, hamstring injury. What does it mean for the Cardinals? What does it impact their ability or their willingness to add a starting pitcher on the free agent market? Blake Snell still available. Jordan Montgomery still available. We'll talk about that. And the Cardinals are off to a bad start in spring training. What does it mean for the season? Do the Cardinals need to make any additional moves? All of that and much, much more on this episode of Long Live Baseball covering the St. Louis Cardinals. So let's start with what happened over the last few days. Sonny Gray gets injured, feels a hamstring injury or tightness in his hamstring is what he's calling it. And Derek Gould wrote an article about 2 hours ago for the St. Louis Post-Dispatch. I highly recommend it. And Sonny Gray also gave an interview where he was really candid. And, he said, let's call it for what it is. It sucks. And he did say it was a mild hamstring injury. He wouldn't commit to if he's going to be ready for opening day. That was one of the first questions that was asked. John Denton asked him, is this something that's going to affect your opening day availability? And he wouldn't comment on that. So what I do know about hamstrings is they tend to linger, and so that's not very good. But considering this is just a mild hamstring injury, again, I'll get into some of these quotes here just to tell you what Ollie Marmol said, what John Mozeliak said, how it affects potentially them adding a starting pitcher. And it's definitely in question. And that's what John Mozeliak said. It's in question for Gray to be the opening day starter. So it's not a guarantee anymore. And Ollie Marmol said, and I quote, obviously, this is our first test. It's unfortunate. The players are going to respond the way they need to respond. This is a guy that's a leader in the way he goes about his business and is a vocal leader. He's going to continue to do those things as he prepares. Thankfully, it's mild. It's not something that's going to sideline him for a couple months. And when asked if the Cardinals would go add another pitcher, this is probably what most Cardinal fans would be interested in. It's probably going to be a disappointing answer, although it's probably not a surprising answer from John Mozeliak. He says, and I quote, I definitely feel it's not something that's required at this point. Obviously, if something changes, we'd have to look at it differently, but we're not thinking we're going to have to do that. So, again, if you're wondering, would the Sonny Gray injury propel the Cardinals into making a move? It really sounds like they're set with their starting pitching rotation. And how this affects things going forward, if this is a mild injury, and again, hamstring injuries tend to linger. It's a little different for pitchers. But if hopefully this is just a 2 to 3 week thing, maybe he misses a couple starts and that's it. But imagine it just kind of sheds light on the Cardinals starting pitching rotation. And again, you could say, oh, well, Seth, if anybody loses their best starting pitcher, they're obviously going to be in trouble. And that's true. But when you look at the Cardinals starting pitching rotation, when this news came across my phone and I got the news that Sonny Gray is dealing with a hamstring injury, my heart dropped in my chest because now you're probably depending on Miles Michaelis to be your ace. The Cardinals at least had the hope of Adam Wainwright, the potential of Jack Flaherty and Jordan Montgomery, who seemingly was never hurt and was always reliable. Now Miles Michaelis is going to be your one, Lance Lynn your two, Kyle. Like, it sheds light on just how thin the Cardinals are at the starting pitching rotation. And oh, by the way, those guys aren't necessarily spring chickens either. So this is a very fragile construction of the starting pitching rotation. And it sheds light on the fact that the Cardinals, and again, I've said this 100 times on this channel, on this show, it sheds light on the fact that the Cardinals lost their way developing pitchers, and it's hurt them. And they're using a lot of resources on Sonny Gray, Lance Lynn, Kyle Gibson to try to put a big old Band-Aid on a gaping wound that was the starting pitching rotation. And we'll see if it works out. Hopefully, Sonny Gray comes back. Maybe he misses a start or two, and that's it. But I think the bigger picture here is these guys are going to have to stay healthy. Steven Matz is going to have to stay healthy because let's just say Sonny Gray goes down. Okay, now you add Zach Thompson to the rotation or Liberatore. Oh, Lance Lynn misses a couple starts. Now you got to bring up Drew Rom or somebody like that. It gets real, and then after that, what do you do? I mean, it gets real thin real quick. And so I'm not saying it's time to panic, but hopefully the Cardinals are looking at this situation going, man, we don't have a lot of depth behind these guys. So maybe another starting pitcher would make sense. And I know Michael Lorenzen didn't have the best year last year, but he's an option that's mentioned in this article that could potentially be added. Michael Lorenzen's 32 years old. He's coming off a season where he had a 5.51 ERA. He threw a no-hitter. So that could be a guy that you could add for relatively cheap. That could be a swing guy in the bullpen. He could be a starter. I mean, this is the kind of guy, if they're not willing to go get Jordan Montgomery, and again, I've said it 100 times on this show, probably more, they should go get Jordan Montgomery. They should add to the starting pitching, because as of right now, I mean, if the goal is to go deep in the playoffs, because that's something the Cardinals haven't done, and who knows if this team is good enough to get to the playoffs. I think they're going to win the NL Central, but now if Sonny Gray misses time, that's going to hurt their chances in a very, very competitive division with the Chicago Cubs and their farm system. It's going to be tough. These are the kinds of players I think that they need to add. And in a playoff series with Jordan Montgomery and Sonny Gray at the top, that gives you the best chance that you can have with the players that are available until you can develop some real starting pitching at the minor league level. It really doesn't sound, as of right now, that the Cardinals are willing to do that. And I think ultimately it's going to hurt them by not spending the extra 20 to 30 million. And I know it would be a lot. John Mozeliak may lose his job. Ali Marmol may lose his job. Paul Goldschmidt might be traded. Nolan Arenado might be traded if this thing doesn't go well. I mean, this is a pivotal season for the St. Louis Cardinals in many, many ways. So not going the extra mile. And again, I understand it's not up to John Mozeliak. He doesn't set the monetary, the amount of money that is spent on players. That's not up to John Mozeliak, but it's the ownership group that has an eye on that. And the Bally Sports deal obviously is something that goes into that evaluation. And that's something that's very murky and foggy. And we don't really have a good idea of what's going on there and of what the Cardinals plan to do beyond this year, because the contract, as far as I understand, runs out this year towards the end of this season. So we'll see. But man, oh man, like, just focused on pure baseball, it really feels like the Cardinals starting rotation is very fragile. And if one or two or of these guys go down, and I get it, like I said, if any team loses one or two of their starting pitchers, it hurts, but it feels like it's really going to hurt the Cardinals. Like, let's just look at the Chicago Cubs, for instance. If they lose Justin Steele, well, they signed Imanaga. They have Jordan Wicks, who's available. Now, that's another team that could probably use some starting pitching, but they also have prospects in their system that they're developing, better pitching prospects than the Cardinals have, that they can bring up in a pinch. The Cardinals, I mean, you could say Gordon Graceffo, you could say Tekoa Roby, you could say Tink Hence, but especially Tink Hence, I don't think he's ready to go. I don't know if Gordon Graceffo is ready to go. He might be a dark horse for the bullpen, maybe. Again, the Cardinals just don't have those guys yet. And this is the biggest frustration, I think, is the Cardinals have been somewhere in between this win now team and this team that is unwilling to go all in. And I talked about it a couple episodes ago that this is the Cardinals version, the 2024 Cardinals version, when teams are willing to spend almost $300 million on players, and the Cardinals are not willing to go above 160, 170. This is all in for the St. Louis Cardinals. And I know we can question what the revenue streams and all this stuff, 3 million plus fans, they should be spending more on players. This is their version of all in, folks. This is what they're comfortable with. This is all they're going to do. And I guess we just have to get used to it, or just not go to the games. I don't know what to say at this point. But it's been beyond frustrating, because it really feels like the Cardinals over the last several years really had a chance to go all in with Yadier Molina and the last years of Adam Wainwright. If they didn't do it then, it's a hard case to make that they're going to do it now in a year Just think about it. They went 71-91 in 2022 in a year where they were coming off being Central Division champions, winning 93 games in Yadier Molina's last year. They felt like they needed to replace the catcher, and they signed Wilson Contreras to not $100 million deal, but an $88 million contract. So they were willing to spend money in that case to fill a position that they thought of need. Yeah, they 75 million 3 years for Sonny Gray. That could turn into over $100 million in total spending with the option. But outside of that, Lance Lynn, Kyle Gibson, I mean, these are fine fourth and fifth starters, but man, oh man, to not really go in, especially when these guys are still available, especially when Jordan Montgomery is out there potentially on a 1-year deal. Blake Snell, who could have imagined this? Who could have imagined that these guys would still be available in this weird, we're not going to talk to Scott Boras's clients, collusion, not collusion, who knows what's going on type of deal? Who knows? It could be a Cody Bellinger type deal. It could be a 1-year deal. To me, it's a no-brainer as an owner of a team where you year after year after year you get 3 million fans. I mean, the revenue, you can't tell me the revenue isn't there. I just don't understand it. So again, that's my long way of saying that this Cardinals pitching rotation is extremely fragile compared to most teams. It's very, very old. And hopefully bringing in a guy like Kyle Bloom can help them develop pitching sooner rather than later, because man, they need to start manufacturing some of these pitchers. Hopefully Tink Hence is going to be good. Hopefully Graceffo and Tekoa Roby and some others. Cooper Herpy is looking good in spring training, so that's good. I mean, there are some guys that the Cardinals have, but it feels like they're a year away, and hopefully hopefully everything goes well and these veterans are healthy and the Cardinals can make the playoffs. But when this news came across the ticker that Sonny Gray was hurt, it really felt like, oh no, like this is not the way to start a year in 2024 where you're coming off of a season where you finished in last place. It really just felt, ugh. I don't know how else to say it. And it really, I think, sheds light on the lack of depth that the Cardinals have if they incur an injury or two in that starting pitching rotation. So anyway, let me know what you think about the Sonny Gray injury. It's hopefully it's minor. Hopefully he's ready by opening day, but there is no indication that he's going to be ready. He's in his interview, Sonny Gray was really candid. He said, I'll let you, I don't know, but the next couple days are going to be an indicator of how I think it's going to go, just based on how I feel. So we'll see. All right. So as I'm recording this on March 6th, the Cardinals are 4-5 in the Grapefruit League. They're towards the bottom of the standings. And Paul Goldschmidt, finally, Paul Goldschmidt hit a home run in spring training and got us off the schneid, got the St. Louis Cardinals off the schneid with their lack of home runs. And it's back. And so hopefully this leads to a bunch more home runs in spring. And like I said, the Cardinals, towards the bottom of the standing. Some people are worried about this, and I'm here to tell you that I'm not one of them. Because last year, if you remember, the Cardinals had an outstanding spring training, and it all hope was that the Cardinals would repeat as NL Central champions, and we all know how that went. So spring training, especially listening to some former players talk about spring training and some of the things that they're focused on, because let's face it, for guys like Paul Goldschmidt, Nolan Arenado, even Jordan Walker, and guys like Mason Wynn, yeah, they want to do well, but there are certain things those players are focused on doing. They might be focused on driving the ball the other way. They might be focused on trying to hit a curveball. Who knows what their point of emphasis is in spring training. Sometimes they just want to get a feel for pitchers. They just want to get their timing back. And so they take pitches. They take more pitches than they would take in the regular season. And they try to get a rhythm, and they try to get their approach ready for the start of the major league season. So all of those factors go into play. And these teams are really not trying to win these games either. That's another thing. I mean, it's not like they're going all out trying to win a spring training game. They're not bringing in the closer. They're not throwing their ace out there in the ninth inning to win a spring training game. They're doing whatever it takes to get themselves, to get their bodies ready for the beginning of the MLB season. It's very, very much like like preseason in the NFL. If you're an NFL fan, you know that preseason in the NFL, sometimes the football is pretty close to unwatchable, but it's really meant for the 53rd, 54th, 52nd guy on the roster to prove that he needs to make the roster. So when you watch spring training, you really need to have your eye on the Alec Burlesons of the world, maybe even the Dylan Carlsons of the world. I don't know if he's going to make the roster, but Victor Scott is another guy. Like, these are the players that you need to have your eye on. And so far in spring training, Alec Burleson is hitting very well in spring training. He's hitting 353 with an on-base percentage of 380, 389. His OPS is a little bit low, but I mean, he's 6 for 17. He scored a run. He's driven in a couple RBIs. Mason Wynn is hitting 250, 4 for 16 with a couple of doubles. Victor Scott has not hit well. He's 3 for 16. So these are the kinds of guys that are getting opportunities. And again, Dylan Carlson is a guy who's not playing well in spring training. And if there's anybody that needs to prove to the Cardinals that he's going to be a contributor in 2024, you would think it would be Dylan Carlson. Like, I wouldn't think that Dylan Carlson's spot on the roster is cemented. If Victor Scott or somebody else can prove that they're going to be a better hitter, a better matchup for the St. Louis Cardinals, and it's going to be super awkward with Alec Burleson, especially with the signing of Brendan Crawford. I think he's going to make the roster. I don't know, but Matt Carpenter and Brendan Crawford are two guys that are going to make the roster unless barring some unforeseen circumstance. So it's going to be interesting to monitor, especially with Alec Burleson playing well in spring training. He's been one of the highlights. Cesar Prieto is another guy, 6 for 12, batting 500, on base percentage 538 with an OPS over 100 or 1 or however you want to say that. And of course, my guy Matt Koperniak is 6 for 10, batting 600 with a 1300 OPS. And other guys, I mean, it's not as important for the guys that we know are going to be on the roster, but Lars Nootbaar, 4 for 9 in spring training. Luken Baker hitting 250, drove in 3 runs. Jose Fermin, 316 batting average in spring training. Ivan Herrera playing well in spring training. And again, it's a limited sample size, and there's only been 9 games so far. So again, I reiterate, I know I was freaking out a little bit about the starting pitching, and I think the starting pitching is going to be average to below average. Like, the range of outcomes for the St. Louis Cardinals starting pitching goes from like 20th to all the way up to like 12th in Major League Baseball. Like, it's going to be middle of the pack. It's not going to be great. It's not going to be terrible. There's more of a floor this year, but injuries really could impact it. And if they get a couple injuries, then look out. I mean, it's not really the most well-built starting pitching rotation. It really was built out of desperation. That's kind of what you're seeing with these veterans that were brought in. But with the position groups, with these guys and hitting, I can remember that when Tony La Russa, I think it was the year they won the World Series, and they were asking, David Freese and Albert Pujols and the guys, they just weren't hitting towards the beginning of the season. And Tony La Russa did one of his famous press conferences where he just stormed off, and he said, "Do you really think Albert, Yachty, David Freese, you really think these guys aren't going to hit?" Well, I think we can have a similar approach as Cardinals fans right now. Do you really think Paul Goldschmidt's not going to hit? Do you really think Nolan Arenado's not going to hit? Jordan Walker, Lars Nootbaar, Wilson Contreras. You really think these guys aren't going to hit? But this Cardinals offense is going to be good. I am very confident in saying that. I am much more worried about the starting pitching rotation and would feel much better if the Cardinals just ponied up and paid Jordan Montgomery to come back. And I know there are some reports out there that say that he is not willing to do that. But I I don't know, why is that? Is it a leadership issue? Because you've solved that with Brendan Crawford and Matt Carpenter. Problem solved, baby. Leadership back on the top of the charts. We're leadership central around here. So many leaders in that club. So many that, in fact, that I hope that there's not too many leaders. You don't want to. I mean, you don't want too many leaders. You don't want your leaders fighting over who's going to be the leader, right? So hopefully we don't have that situation. Hopefully we haven't overcorrected the leadership problem in the St. Louis Cardinals clubhouse. I jest here. I kid around with the leadership in the clubhouse situation, but it's just funny because, like, just to wrap up here again, we shouldn't be panicking about the performance in the spring training. I think the players are going to be fine. I think there's some really good things happening at spring training, and really what it leads to is this excitement that is building, that builds toward every opening day that I can remember. It is always one of the highlights of my year, seeing Cardinals baseball back on the television. April, late March this year. It's coming. We're about 3 weeks away from opening day. So again, as much as the Cardinals frustrate me and the starting pitching rotation is driving me up a wall, and hopefully Sonny Gray is back, I don't think it's time to panic. I think Sonny Gray, maybe he misses a start or two. I think it's going to be fine. Hopefully the Cardinals do not incur another injury or two to their starting pitching rotation. And I think if they do, I think the Cardinals would add a veteran starting pitcher. But I want to know what you think. And let me know, do you think the Cardinals need to add another starting pitcher? I will raise my hand and say yes, that I think the Cardinals should add another starting pitcher to their starting rotation. And I think that player should be Jordan Montgomery on a 1-year deal, or a deal very similar to the Chicago Cubs Cody Bellinger deal. And somebody, if anybody's out there that can tell me why that would be a bad idea, I'd love to hear that too. And number two, do you think this Cardinals starting pitching rotation is good enough to propel the Cardinals into the playoffs? I think if they stay healthy, they can, with the added weaponry in the bullpen. I think the Cardinals bullpen is really going to be above average this year. And if they can get to Ryan Helsley, and Ryan Helsley can have a good year, that's going to help out a ton. And I think the Cardinals offense is going to be a top 5 caliber offense, for sure top 10 in runs scored, all that, if everybody stays healthy. And of course, that's a big deal. But the Cardinals have more reinforcements hitting wise than they do pitching wise. But anyway, let me know what you think in the comments. Don't forget to like and subscribe the video. Don't forget to give the podcast a 5-star review on Apple Podcasts. And again, we are 3 weeks away from opening day. It's exciting. It's an exciting time. Thank you so much for watching. Thank you so much for listening. Again, don't forget to like and subscribe on YouTube. Don't forget to give a 5-star review and a comment. We will see you next time. Be good, everybody. Bye-bye now.